here's Brody Brazil.
All right, I'm excited about this matchup. I know you are too. I'm not going to waste a lot of time setting all this up. I'm just going to get to 8 points, 8 things that are on my mind as Oakland is getting ready to take on Houston in the ALDS. Number 1 is the regular season history of 2020, where the A's went 7-3 against the Astros. I'll go series by series and go back through the timeline here. Their first meetings were August 7th through 9th at the Coliseum, and at that point, the A's swept the series in 3, but they also extended their own win streak to 9 games, so they were on the biggest roll of their season. In that 9th and final game, on August 9th, Ramon Laureano and hitting coach for Houston, Alex Cintrone, got into that verbal scuffle. Cintrone baited Laureano. Laureano went after the Houston dugout. At that point, right, it was a pretty quiet series up until then. All of a sudden, you could sense that the tensions had boiled over, the rivalry was renewed. And all of this, by the way, goes back to Laureano getting hit by pitches 3 times across that weekend. He had had enough. So that kind of made it very spicy, the very first head-to-head meeting in the series of this 2020 season. The next series was scheduled for August 28th through 30th in Houston. Now, the first game did not get played as scheduled because both teams came together and decided to protest together with the racial injustices going on in our country. The next day was a doubleheader on Saturday. Oakland lost both of those games. Now, I do want to point out here, the A's only lost to Houston 3 times. 2 of them came in that doubleheader on the same day, both in games that were obviously not 9 innings. So that's interesting. And then the final day, they were supposed to play on Sunday. They didn't, because the A's came up positive with a COVID test, and so they had to reschedule that. The third series head-to-head was September 7th through 10th, so 4 days in Oakland, and 5 games scheduled across these 4 days. Now, one of them was the Astros being the home team at the Coliseum, which was bizarre to say the least, but in that 5-game series, kind of like a 5-game playoff series, the A's won 4 of 5 in Oakland. In all their meetings, Oakland outscored Houston 38-25. It's also important to note that the A's only played that one road day, that doubleheader on the road in Houston. So a majority of the games, Oakland had home field advantage. What's interesting about these two teams now in the playoffs, we know so much more about this matchup head-to-head. We saw them do it 10 times together, as opposed to the series we just saw, the A's in Chicago. At least this year, they knew nothing about each other. They did not meet in the regular season. What does that mean? I don't know yet. Obviously, it's interesting, though. All right, number 2. Speaking of that Laureano, Alex Cintrone incident, Ramon, he got hit 3 times that weekend, twice in that game. He was baited, like I said. At that point, early August, the tension still existed. Now, I'm not sure how much it still does, or how much that tension is devalued, because the playoffs mean everything, and you're not necessarily here to settle personal vendettas. You're here to eliminate the opponent and get that chance to do it. I will say this, though, in this series, we should closely monitor hit batters. We have to, and I think that's a true sign of whether something has carried over, whether it's boiling over again. We'll be watching that very carefully. All right, third point to make here. Speaking of the controversy and the tension, Mike FIERS is going to get the opportunity to face not only his former team, but the team he called out in November of 2019 for their cheating scandal in Major League Baseball. FIERS did not have the opportunity to face them head-to-head this season. And it's crazy because you look back at the schedule, he missed them all 3 times by 1 day, either on the front or back end of the series. And Bob Melvin even quoted today on this saying, it's just the way it played out. And I think you could see in line the whole way. It wasn't like the A's were avoiding this at all. It's just the way it worked out. And that's interesting. I do think we're going to see FIERS getting this chance to go up against the Astros. But really, if you're Mike FIERS, what do you care about this? Isn't it more the Astros with the vendetta? Isn't it them wanting to send the statement for FIERS? He did what he did. He said what he said. And the Astros have been living up to that or living down to that ever since. So I don't know if it affects FIERS as much as it potentially does something to the Astros if they're going to face Mike FIERS, number 50, on the mound. Number 4, another pitcher, Sean MANAEA. I hope we get to see him this series. The A's didn't use him at all against Chicago, and a huge part of that had to be the way that the White Sox had tagged left-handed pitching, left-handed starters specifically in 2020. They never lost to a lefty starter, 15-0, including Game 1 of the series facing Jesus Luzardo. But there's also this about MANAEA. When he faced Houston this year, he was masterful back on September 10th. In that game, the A's won 3-1. But it goes deeper than that. MANAEA started, he went 7 innings, only allowed 2 hits, did allow 1 run, didn't walk anybody, struck out 4. But this is the best part. On 61 pitches, 7 innings on 61 pitches. It was one of the most efficient outings in Oakland A's franchise history. So you've got to like that past track record and success. Now, the bigger question about the rotation, when and where MANAEA might slot in, is how does a rotation look in a 5-game series? We know what the A's did in 3 games, but in 5 games, especially a series like this where there's no travel, it's all the neutral site, so you're only going to get home games, well, really home games for each team, but you're not going to have travel days in between. So you're not going to have the opportunity to rest or somebody else to get an extra day of rest. I'm curious if it's going to be 4 different starters for Oakland, if they can swing that and use somebody on short rest, or if they're going to have 5 different starters for these 5 potential different games. All right, speaking of 5, let's get to my 5th point here. The Houston Astros, they eliminated Minnesota in the wild card round in 2 games to advance. They actually finished on Wednesday. Now, the A's took all 3 games in their wild card round, so they finished on Thursday. But look, I'm just curious that the time off here, how the time off is going to affect both teams. Sometimes you benefit from rest. Sometimes rust goes against you. In either way, if you're the A's or Astros, you're getting probably a couple more days off here than you would wish from the prior round to this round. Now, should the A's have some momentum the way they won that series? You would think so. There was far more drama in the A's-White Sox series, in a good way for Oakland, because they came out on the right side. There was far more drama there than there was in the Twins and Astros series. You should also know this about the Minnesota Twins. They have an 18-game playoff losing streak. Going back to 2004, I don't know if I believe in every curse in the world, but they might be close to that. I would also say about the Oakland A's, they must have some built-in confidence, chemistry going into this series. It must already exist because they've faced elimination twice, in Game 2 and in Game 3 of the wild card round. There's something about having your backs against the wall and coming out on the right side that makes you a more resilient team as you continue in the playoffs. And that goes for baseball, basketball, hockey. I guess football isn't like that in terms of a series, but any sport with a series like that, I really do feel like it makes a difference in a positive way for your team once you've faced elimination. And then there's also this, what about the impact of the neutral site? No team's really going to feel like it's their home turf. Batting last is pretty much the only tangible advantage, I suppose. So I'm curious. I don't want to make huge predictions on that, but I'm curious to see how it will shake out for both teams. All right, number 6, let's talk about some Houston Astros keys here. Number 1, we thought Justin Verlander would be healthy and back in time to pitch for the postseason. Obviously, he's not. He's gone for a long time, maybe 1 or 2 seasons. He says he needs Tommy John surgery. We know the track record of Verlander and postseasons and how that has ultimately hurt the Oakland A's multiple times. We would never wish injury on anybody. All right? I want to establish that. But at the same point, for Houston not to be able to pull Verlander out of their bag, that changes this series in a great way for the Oakland A's. Zach Greinke has been their ace here in 2020. You would have to think he's going to start Game 1, but he struggled in September. Look up the stats. In that wild card round, Jose Altuve, 0 for 7. He did walk twice in those 2 games. Alex Bregman in the wild card round, 1 for 7. He did make some good plays at third base, but I'll move on to Yulieski Gurriel. In the wild card round, 1 for 8. Now, I'm not going to put words in their mouth or make excuses for these guys, but all 3 of those guys did miss significant time this year. They all battled injuries. And I'm not here to say that they're completely healthy. Look, a lot of players are not this time of year. They're fighting through something. Even in a 60-game season, trust me, there's a lot of things on both sides you're not completely aware of. But I'm curious to know how those guys are truly hanging in there, what type of impact they'll make here in the ALDS. I've got my eyes, trained on them to see what they do. Then there's also George Springer. He, in round 1, went 1 for 9 against the Twins. So there you have it. On the flip side, let's get to number 7, the point here. Biggest Oakland keys, key players. Sean Murphy, the 9-hitter for the A's, and I say 9-hitter, but he has meant so much more to the team than that. In the month of September, also in the playoff series so far, Game 3 had that huge 2-run homer, got Oakland on the board, started their rally of 6 runs in 2 innings and turned the game around. And not only that, but catching the staff. This has been a short season, but a huge season for Sean Murphy to establish himself in Major League Baseball. And the swings he takes, he does not get cheated. You talk about the A's being a home run team and how that can impact the game one swing of the bat. Sean Murphy, as the 9-hitter, is just as much a threat to leave the yard as anybody. Tommy La Stella, not just the circus catch he made the other day, but a solid second base defensively. And, oh yeah, the obvious. Dude is an on-base machine, rarely strikes out, always seems to do something productive with the bat, even if he doesn't get on base. But again, more often than not, he does find a way to get on base. Chris Davis, I like the way that in games 2 and 3, he took advantage of opportunities. I really do feel like that's an X factor right there. And just some strange gut instinct. And I know he struggled this year, was a platoon DH basically, and coming off of last season, which he wants to forget too. But I really feel like in these last couple of games and where things are going, don't sleep on KD. Chad Pender was a pinch hitter in Game 3. What a huge role he played. Got the single in his first at-bat, was intentionally walked his second, and then ultimately had the single which drove in the A's 2 game-winning runs in his third at-bat. Also plays a solid defensive third base. I feel super confident with him or Jake Lamb at the hot corner. Obviously, it's hard to replace the Platinum Glover, and that is definitely something the A's will miss in this series. You're not going to get that Bregman and Chapman factor at third base as well as in the lineup hitting, but feel pretty good about Chad Pender and Jake Lamb. 2 more guys to mention here. Jesus Luzardo. I know him starting round 1, the wild card round. It didn't go as planned. It didn't go as hoped for him. But look, that's the beauty of this. I said at the time, the hard part was that he would have to sit on that result and coming out early and struggling. He'd have to sit on that until he got his next chance. Guess what? I think his next chance is coming sooner than later, and that's a great thing. Chris Bassett was flawless in Game 2, was absolutely nails. Like mentally, physically, I loved everything about his start in Game 2. I don't know where he's going to slot in the rotation here in round 2, but I can't wait to see it. Looking forward to it, honestly, the day he pitches. All right, let's get to our 8th and final point here. Karma for the Houston Astros. Carlos Correa said this the other day after they eliminated Minnesota. Quote, "I know a lot of people are mad. I know a lot of people don't want to see us here, but what are they going to say now?" End quote. They're going to say that you didn't win the World Series yet and that you won 2 games against the Twins, who are on an 18-game losing streak in the playoffs. They're also going to say that you're a 29-31 team in the regular season. That's right, you got into the playoffs with a losing record. It just doesn't normally happen in sports. It's an abnormality here of 2020, the fact that they're even in it. Now, I'm not going to throw a ton of shade. I just wanted to point that out, but I do want to read you the follow-up quote from CC Sabathia, who really didn't need to go this far, but I think it's interesting he saw this, felt the need to respond on his podcast. He said, quote, "They cheated and then they're mad at us. Like, get the F out of here. It's an effing joke. And then you finish under 500 this year. Like, shut the F up. The kid's a clown. I'm sorry. end quote. That's what CC Sabathia said. So look, I don't want to drag this on, but I think it's safe to say, as much as A's fans are obviously rooting for their team, I'm curious what the rest of the baseball world, how they're going to view this series, who they're going to side with, seeing that it's the A's and Astros. And again, a lot of teams have personal vendettas against Houston. The Dodgers do because of the World Series. A lot of teams that met up with Houston in respective playoff rounds have an issue, but specifically for the Oakland A's, 2018 and 2019. 97 wins each of those years for the A's. They lost the division by 3 games one year, and I want to say, was it 7 games the next year? You're going to have to check me on that one. But the bottom line is, how many wins was cheating worth for Houston in those times? Did it get him 5 extra wins a year? 7, 10? Because if it did, the A's were robbed of division titles. The A's were robbed of playing series to open the playoffs instead of one-game wildcard rounds. All right, so that's it. A's and Astros series preview. Again, I am so looking forward to this. Can't wait to see you on television 30 minutes before every game telecast. 30 minutes before, check us out with A's Pregame Live on NBC Sports California.